Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. Nothing stings quite like irony. After 15 years of meticulous preparation, thousands of dollars invested in supplies and equipment, and countless hours spent planning for every conceivable disaster scenario, I found myself trapped in the worst possible situation, away from my fortified sanctuary, when everything fell apart. It started as a routine supply run to Marion, Ohio. The small city was just far enough from my property to make the trip worthwhile, but close enough to get back before dark. Max, my German Shepherd, sat alert in the passenger seat of my F-150 as we cruised down the empty morning streets. The October air was crisp and clear, the kind of autumn morning that tricks you into believing the world makes sense. I spotted the first signs of trouble at Wilson's Hardware. The parking lot was packed, unusual for 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. People streamed in and out of the store, arms loaded with supplies, batteries, flashlights, bottled water. My pulse quickened. As a prepper, you develop a sixth sense for impending chaos. This wasn't normal panic buying. There was an edge to it, a desperation in their movements. I pulled into the lot, parking away from the crowd. Max's ears perked up, sensing my tension. "Stay alert, boy," I murmured, checking my concealed carry holster. The Glock 19 felt reassuring against my side. In the truck bed, safely locked in their cases, I had my AR-15 and Remington 870. Some might call it paranoid. I called it prepared. Inside Wilson's, the atmosphere was electric. The usual morning quiet was replaced by urgent whispers and the screech of shopping cart wheels against linoleum. I caught fragments of conversations. Entire hospital quarantined. Military convoys heading south. Phones are down in Columbus. I grabbed what I needed quickly. Spark plugs, copper wire, motor oil. The prepper in me wanted to stock up, but 15 years of preparation meant I already had everything essential safely stored away. As I waited in line, an elderly couple ahead of me whispered about their son, a nurse at Marion General Hospital. Apparently, the emergency room had been overwhelmed overnight with people exhibiting aggressive behavior and high fevers. The cashier's hands trembled as she rang up my items. Her name tag read Charlotte, and her eyes darted nervously between customers. "My manager just called," she confided in a low voice. "Said not to come in for the evening shift. Said things are getting bad at the hospital." Back in the truck, I tried calling home to check my security system. No signal. The radio yielded only static across most frequencies, except for one emergency broadcast channel repeating the same message. "Remain in your homes. Do not approach individuals exhibiting aggressive or erratic behavior. Emergency services are overwhelmed. Please remain calm." I started the engine, my mind racing through scenarios. The hospital was 5 blocks east. I needed to head west, toward home. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, a military convoy roared past, heading toward downtown. 3 Humvees and a transport truck moving fast. In all my years of preparation, I'd learned one crucial rule. When the military moves with urgency, you move faster. The streets were growing more chaotic by the minute. People rushed from stores to cars, some already wearing masks. A police cruiser screamed past, siren wailing. Max growled low in his throat. He was trained to alert me to threats, and something had him on edge. I was about to turn onto the main road when I saw it. A man staggering out of an alleyway, moving with an odd, stiff gait. His clothes were soaked in what looked like blood, and his movements were wrong. He lurched toward a woman loading groceries into her car. She didn't see him coming. Max's growl deepened. I reached for my horn, but before I could sound a warning, the man was on her. His teeth sank into her shoulder, tearing through cloth and flesh. Her scream cut through the morning air like a knife. The world seemed to slow down. The woman fell, her attacker following her down, still biting, still tearing. People began screaming. A man ran to help but stopped short as the woman's assailant turned toward him. revealing a face that barely looked human anymore. Gray skin, vacant eyes, blood-stained teeth. I'd prepared for nuclear war, economic collapse, natural disasters, and civil unrest. But as I watched that scene unfold, as more screams erupted from different directions, I realized I was witnessing something I'd never truly believed possible, something no amount of preparation could have fully prepared me for. "Max," I said quietly, my hands tight on the steering wheel. "I think we're in trouble, boy. All those years of prepping, all those carefully laid plans, and here I was, miles from my fortified sanctuary with hell breaking loose around me. The irony would be laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. I had to get home, but as I surveyed the rapidly deteriorating scene around me, I realized that getting there would be far more challenging than I could have imagined. The morning sun continued to rise over Marion, illuminating a world that was unraveling by the minute, and I was caught in the middle of it. Getting out of Marion proved more difficult than I'd anticipated. The main roads were already gridlocked with people trying to flee, their cars packed with hastily gathered belongings. I could see children pressing their faces against car windows, confusion and fear evident in their expressions. The chorus of car horns created a symphony of panic that seemed to draw more of those blood-covered assailants from every direction. Max remained vigilant beside me, his ears forward, muscles tense. His training was invaluable. I'd spent years teaching him to detect threats and remain quiet unless necessary. Now his subtle changes in posture told me more than any news broadcast could. I navigated through side streets, grateful for all the times I'd studied alternative routes during my prep planning. A glimpse in my rearview mirror showed chaos unfolding downtown. Black smoke rose from several locations, and the distant wail of sirens competed with sporadic bursts of gunfire. The radio crackled to life with an emergency broadcast, different from the previous one. Confirmed reports of violent individuals showing signs of infection. Initial symptoms include high fever, aggression, and... Wait. We're getting reports that, oh God, they're in the building. Everyone needs to... The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Infection. The word hung in my mind as I processed what I'd seen. The vacant eyes, the aggressive behavior, the biting. It all pointed to something I'd read about in survival forums, but had always dismissed as fantasy. But now, watching another infected person stagger past an abandoned car, I couldn't deny what I was seeing. This was a zombie outbreak, as impossible as that seemed. I turned onto Oak Street, noticing the Marion Police Department building ahead. At least a dozen police cruisers sat in the parking lot, but there was no sign of officers, just more of those creatures wandering aimlessly. A woman in a torn police uniform stumbled near the entrance, her utility belt still intact but empty. Max's low growl alerted me to movement on our right. A man in a blood-soaked business suit charged toward my truck, mouth open in a silent snarl. I swerved to avoid him, nearly hitting a parked car in the process. These things were fast, nothing like the slow shamblers from horror movies. A banging on my driver's side window made me jump. A young woman stood there, maybe mid-30s, clutching a baseball bat. Behind her, two kids huddled against a fence. "Please," she mouthed through the glass, gesturing frantically at the approaching infected. I lowered the window slightly. "Where are you heading?" "The church on Vernon Street," she said quickly. "It's just a few blocks away. They're gathering people there." After dropping them at the church, where armed men stood guard on the roof, I tried to find a way out of the city. But the streets had become impassable. Abandoned vehicles, wandering infected, and sporadic gunfights blocked every route. I needed somewhere secure to wait it out. That's when I spotted it. A colonial-style house with an attached two-car garage. The garage door was open, but the interior was dark and seemingly empty. More importantly, the house sat just a block from the police station. If things got worse, I'd at least be near what should be a defensive strongpoint. I pulled into the garage slowly, Max alert for any threats. The space was clean and organized, someone's workshop, with tools hanging neatly on pegboards. A side door led into the house and another door opened to a fenced backyard. Tactically, it was defensible. Just as I was about to cut the engine, a military helicopter thundered overhead, flying low enough to rattle the windows. I watched it pass, heading toward downtown Marion. But I knew better than to expect rescue. The government's response would be too little, too late. This infection, whatever it was, had spread too quickly. Using a rake from the garage, I managed to pull the manual garage door release and lower it without getting out of the truck. The heavy door rolled down with a low rumble that made me wince, but it sealed us in relative safety. The fact that these infected could run changed everything I thought I knew about zombie scenarios. My property's defenses were designed with slow, mindless attackers in mind. I'd need to rethink some of my preparations, assuming I survived long enough to make it home. I kept the truck ready for a quick exit, backing it up so the rear faced the garage door. Through a small window, I could see more infected gathering in the street, drawn by the helicopter's noise. Some sprinted past the house, while others milled around aimlessly until something caught their attention. Max stayed alert in the passenger seat as I did a quick inventory of our surroundings. The garage offered some useful supplies, tools that could serve as weapons, a workbench for cover, and high shelves that could serve as an observation post if needed. A water cooler stood in the corner, half full. The pegboard held a variety of tools that could prove useful. But what really caught my attention was a police scanner sitting on the workbench, still turned on but currently silent. If it was working, it might give me insight into what was happening across the city. And right now, information was as valuable as ammunition. The morning wasn't even half over, and already the world had transformed into something nightmarish. I needed to be smart about this, gather information, conserve resources, and wait for an opportunity to make it home. Looking at the growing number of infected in the street, I realized that opportunity might take a while to present itself. The police scanner crackled to life around noon, making both Max and me jump. Through bursts of static, I could hear voices, actual human voices, coordinating from inside the station. They were alive in there, holding out against the infected. More importantly, they were organizing. Perimeter secure on the east side. We need backup at the west entrance. Torres, do you copy? A pause, then. Main entrance is holding. We've got about 20 civilians in here, running low on ammunition. Anyone monitoring this frequency? Marion PD is still operational. We're coordinating evacuation efforts. I studied the street through the garage window. The infected seemed drawn to movement and sound, but they'd disperse when there was nothing to chase. Right now, about 10 of them wandered between me and the police station. The distance wasn't far, maybe 200 yards. But in this new world, every yard felt like a mile. The scanner chirped again. Route 23 is completely blocked. I repeat, Route 23 is impassable. National Guard units are redirecting survivors toward Route 4. The transmission faded into static before returning. Gathering at Phillips Middle School. If anyone can hear this, we're establishing a safe zone. That was the information I needed. Route 4 was my way home, but I'd need to know exactly where the blockades were. The officers in that station would know more about the situation than anyone else in Marion right now. Max's ears perked up as I gathered my gear. He knew we were moving. I checked my Glock and made sure the Remington was fully loaded. The AR-15 would stay in its case, too conspicuous, and the shotgun was better for close encounters anyway. Stay close, I whispered to Max. Silent alert only. He understood. No barking, just physical cues to warn me of danger. We'd practiced this countless times, but never with stakes this high. I cracked the side door of the garage open, checking for any immediate threats. Clear. Moving to the back corner of the house would give me a better angle on the police station's main entrance. I could see officers on the roof, armed with rifles, maintaining a watchful perimeter. We moved fast but quiet, keeping to the shadows of buildings. Max stayed at my heel, his body tense but disciplined. 20 years of training showed in every silent step he took. We were halfway to the station when everything went wrong. A door burst open just ahead of us, and 3 infected emerged, hospital staff, judging by their bloody scrubs. Max's muscles tensed, warning me before I saw them. The first one locked eyes with me, its face contorting into a snarl. I raised the Remington just as it charged. The blast took off half its face, but the noise would draw every infected within blocks. The second one lunged as I racked another shell. I pulled the trigger just as it reached me, the force of the blast knocking it backward. The third one was too close for the shotgun. I swung the weapon like a club, catching it across the face. It stumbled but kept coming. Max broke his silence command, launching himself at the infected's leg, dragging it down with trained precision. I finished it with a blast to the head. "Over here!" a voice called from the station. 2 officers were waving frantically from a side entrance. "Move! Move!" More infected were pouring out of buildings now, drawn by the gunfire. We sprinted toward the station entrance, my lungs burning. Max kept pace, occasionally glancing back to track the threats. The officers provided covering fire, dropping the closest infected with well-placed shots. We cleared the entrance just as the horde reached us. The officers slammed the reinforced door shut, throwing the bolts into place. Heavy thuds echoed through the building as infected bodies slammed against it. "Cutting it pretty close there," one of the officers said, catching his breath. His name tag read Mitchell. "But nice work with the dog. Military trained?" I nodded, still breathing hard. "Former K9 handler. Max is retired police." The other officer, Walsh, nodded approvingly. "That explains a lot. Come on, Chief Turner will want to talk to you. We've been gathering intel from everyone who makes it in." They led us through corridors lined with civilians, families huddled together, elderly couples comforting each other, a few people being treated for injuries in what used to be the break room. The station had become a fortress of sorts, but I could see the strain on everyone's faces. Chief Turner's office had been converted into a command center. Maps covered the walls, marked with evacuation routes and blocked roads. The chief himself stood over a radio set, coordinating with someone about supply drops. He looked up as we entered. "Mitchell said you made it in with a trained K9. What's the situation out there?" I described what I'd seen: the infected's behavior patterns, the overrun streets, the church gathering survivors. "I need to know about Route 4, I finished. "The scanner mentioned National Guard redirecting people that way." Turner nodded grimly. "Route 4 is clear for now, but it won't last. Guard units are falling back to defensive positions. The infection..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's spreading faster than anyone anticipated. We've got reports of similar outbreaks in Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, all within the last 3 hours." He pointed to a map. "If you're heading out that way, you've got maybe 2 hours before they close the corridor completely. But there's something else you should know." His tone made me tense. The way he gripped his desk, the tight line of his jaw. Whatever news he had wasn't just bad. It would change everything. Chief Turner spread a detailed map across his desk. Red marks crisscrossed the surrounding areas, marking blocked roads and accident sites. "It's spreading faster than we anticipated," he said, pointing to several roadblocks. "National Guard's losing ground on the main evacuation routes. They've already pulled back from 3 checkpoints in the last hour. My route home would take me through those areas." "We're getting scattered reports from Columbus," Turner continued, gesturing to an officer monitoring the radio channels. "Similar outbreaks hitting every major population center. The infected are operating on pure instinct, attacking anything that moves, drawn to sound and movement. Headshots are the only thing that stops them consistently." A commotion in the hallway interrupted us. Officer Mitchell burst in, his face pale. "Chief, the west barricade is compromised. They're breaking through the reinforced windows." Turner snapped into action. "Get the civilians to the basement tunnels. Mitchell, coordinate the evacuation. These old prohibition passages connect to the courthouse. They'll keep our people safe until help arrives." He turned to me. "If you're leaving, you'll need to move fast." "My truck's in a garage a block away," I told Turner, studying the map one final time. "I need to get back to it." "Our roof team can provide cover fire," Turner replied, checking his weapon. "But once we start evacuating through the tunnels, you'll be on your own. We can't hold this position much longer." The armory officer supplied me with extra shotgun shells and a spare magazine for my Glock. It wasn't much, but ammunition was precious now. The infected at the west barricade grew louder, their collective weight causing the reinforced windows to crack and splinter. A thunderous crash from the other side of the building punctuated his words. The sound of shattering glass carried through the halls, followed by frantic gunfire. The infected had breached the station. "Go," Turner ordered. "We'll cover you from above." Max and I burst into the afternoon sun above us. Officers positioned on the roof began taking out infected with precise shots. The garage was visible ahead, but reaching it wouldn't be easy. The infected poured from doorways and alleys, drawn by our movement and the gunfire. I raised the Remington as two infected charged toward us. The first shot connected, removing most of its head. The second one stumbled on its fallen companion, giving me the split second I needed to chamber another round and fire. We reached the garage just as more infected flooded out of the police station. The sound of gunfire inside had grown sporadic, a bad sign. The roof team continued providing coverage, their shots piercing through the air as they dropped infected closing in on our position. I managed to get the door up enough to duck under. The truck sat ready, exactly as I'd left it. I jumped in, starting the engine, as Max leapt into the passenger seat. Through the windshield, I could see infected pouring out of the station's broken windows. The officers on the roof had begun retreating, likely heading for the tunnel entrance. The truck's tires spun as I reversed out of the garage. The infected were everywhere now, surging forward in waves. Above, the last of the officers disappeared from the roof. I caught a glimpse of Turner through a second-floor window, directing people toward the basement. Then he too vanished into the building. As we turned onto Center Street, a deafening explosion rocked the area. The blast came from Marion General Hospital 4 blocks away. Flames erupted from the upper floors, and thick black smoke billowed into the sky. The hospital's emergency generators must have ignited. The explosion had an immediate effect on the infected. They turned toward the sound and movement, drawn by the flames and chaos. Hundreds of them streamed out of buildings, all heading toward the hospital. But that created a new problem. They were cutting off our escape route. I pulled into the parking lot of a small strip mall, killing the engine. We needed to wait this out, let the infected clear the area before trying to navigate the streets. But as I watched the crowd grow, I realized we might be stuck here longer than anticipated. Max's alert posture drew my attention to movement behind the strip mall. A chain-link fence separated us from the railway yard beyond, where a long line of cargo containers created a maze of metal corridors. Through gaps between the containers, I could see more infected emerging, attracted by the hospital explosion. We were about to be surrounded. The truck provided protection, but we couldn't stay here. The infected would eventually fill every street, trapping us completely. I needed another way out. The railway yard caught my attention again. Those cargo containers. They created a path, a dangerous one but potentially passable. If we could get through the yard, we'd bypass the worst of the infected concentration and emerge closer to Route 4. I checked my ammunition. 12 shells for the Remington, 2 magazines for the Glock. Not much, but it would have to do. The fence looked climbable, and Max was trained for far more challenging obstacles. A secondary explosion at the hospital lit up the sky. The infected surged forward with renewed intensity, their collective sound rising to a fever pitch. They streamed past our position, drawn to the chaos and flames. Their movement was pure instinct, responding to the loudest noise, the brightest light, the most obvious target. Max remained alert beside me, watching the masses of infected flow past our truck. The hospital fire had created an opportunity. The hordes were being pulled away from several streets, potentially clearing a path out of the city, but timing would be crucial. Through the windshield, I studied the flow of infected, noting how they moved almost like water, following paths of least resistance toward the brightest flames and loudest sounds. If we timed it right, used their instincts against them, we might have a chance to break through. Behind us, the railway yard stood silent, its cargo containers casting long shadows in the firelight. Ahead, the streets began to clear as more infected were drawn to the hospital inferno. We had one shot at this, One chance to use this temporary distraction to our advantage. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, engine idling, watching and waiting for our moment. All my years of preparation, all the scenarios I'd planned for, and now everything would come down to perfect timing, and the hope that pure animal instinct could be predicted and used against these creatures. The timing had to be perfect. I watched the surging masses of infected, counting the seconds between waves as they rushed toward the hospital fires. Each group that passed created a momentary gap, a narrow window of opportunity that closed almost as quickly as it opened. Max's muscles tensed beside me. He sensed my intention, ready for whatever came next. The truck's engine rumbled quietly, awaiting my command. Through the windshield, I could see the orange glow of the hospital flames reflecting off windows and metal surfaces, creating an apocalyptic sunset in the middle of the afternoon. Another explosion rocked the hospital, smaller this time, but enough to draw a fresh wave of infected. As they stampeded past us, I saw our chance. The street ahead had cleared just enough to make a run for it. I shifted into drive and pressed the accelerator. The truck surged forward, cutting across the tide of infected. A few slammed against the hood and fenders, but the bull bar I'd installed years ago proved its worth, deflecting them away from the radiator. We broke through the first wave and accelerated toward Center Street. The hospital's flames cast wild shadows across the road, making it difficult to distinguish debris from infected. I swerved around an overturned mail truck, then cut hard to avoid a cluster of infected that appeared suddenly in the firelight. The truck's heavy-duty suspension absorbed each impact and correction, keeping us stable. "Hold on, Max," I muttered, taking another hard turn. The GPS was useless now, but I knew these streets. 3 more blocks to Market Street, then a straight shot to Route 4. Each intersection presented a new challenge, blind corners that could hide entire hordes of infected. We reached Market Street just as another group of infected streamed across it, chasing the sound of a car alarm in the distance. I braked hard, waiting for them to pass. Max remained perfectly still, understanding the need for stealth even inside the vehicle. The infected moved differently now, their attention split between multiple stimuli: the hospital fires, various alarms, and distant gunshots. Their behavior was pure instinct, but that made it predictable. They always moved toward the loudest noise, the brightest light. When the street cleared, I accelerated again. The truck's tires found purchase on the debris-strewn asphalt, carrying us closer to the city limits. We passed the last clusters of buildings, the urban sprawl giving way to more open spaces. Route 4 lay just ahead. Then everything went wrong. An infected woman appeared from between parked cars, hurling herself at the passenger side with impossible speed. Her head crashed through Max's window, sending glass shards exploding inward. Max yelped, the first sound of distress I'd ever heard from him. As the infected's grasping hands reached for him, time slowed. The infected's bloody face pressed through the broken window. Max backed away, but the center console limited his movement. Those snapping teeth were inches from him. Training or not, he was still a dog, and he was trapped. I couldn't shoot without risking Max. The truck was moving too fast to stop. In desperation, I yanked the wheel hard right, then left. The infected's upper body was still inside the window when we clipped a parked car. The impact tore her away, but not before her nails raked across Max's shoulder. My heart stopped. One scratch, one bite, and I'd lose my only friend in this new world. Max whimpered, another sound I'd never heard from him, and I felt my chest tighten. But when I looked closer, I saw his tactical vest had caught the brunt of the attack. The reinforced material, which I'd insisted he wear despite the October heat, had saved his life. A military helicopter appeared overhead, flying low and fast toward the hospital. Its spotlight swept across the street, momentarily blinding me. I corrected our course, but the noise drew more infected from the surrounding buildings. They burst out of doorways and windows, sprinting toward us with that terrifying speed. The truck's engine roared as I pushed it harder. The broken window meant we were vulnerable now. Cold air whipped through the cab as I accelerated, pushing the engine to its limits. Max pressed closer to me, away from the shattered window, but maintained his alertness despite the close call. Route 4 opened up before us, surprisingly clear compared to the city streets. Most of the infected had been drawn into Marion proper by the chaos. I turned north toward home, finally allowing myself to breathe a little easier. Once we had some distance, I reached over to check Max more thoroughly. His vest was torn where the infected had grabbed him, but his skin wasn't broken. We'd been lucky. The truck's headlights cut through gathering dusk as we sped away from Marion. Smoke from the hospital fires filled the rearview mirror, a dark pillar marking the city's descent into chaos. Occasionally, we passed abandoned vehicles or lone infected wandering aimlessly, but nothing that posed a serious threat. 20 minutes later, I turned onto the unmarked logging road that led to my property. The truck's four-wheel drive handled the rough terrain easily. Each mile brought us closer to safety, closer to the fortress I'd spent years preparing. Max had relaxed slightly, but I could tell the window incident had shaken him. It had shaken me too. A reminder that all my preparation could be undone by a single moment of bad luck. Motion sensors picked up our approach, activating the property's security lights. The reinforced gates stood ready, just as I'd designed them. I entered the code and drove through, making sure they locked behind us. The perimeter cameras showed no movement in the surrounding woods. As we pulled up to the house, I ran through a mental checklist. Solar panels would keep us powered. The greenhouse would provide food. Multiple wells would supply water. The walls and security systems would keep us safe. Everything I'd prepared for was now a necessity, but something felt different. All my planning, all my preparation had been based on surviving alone. Now, after everything I'd seen in Marion, the police trying to protect civilians, survivors helping each other, I realized isolation might not be the answer. Max watched me from the passenger seat, still alert despite his obvious fatigue. I reached over to scratch behind his ears, grateful beyond words that he'd survived. The torn vest was a reminder of how close I'd come to losing him. In this new world, even the smallest mistake could be fatal. The security system hummed as I activated the full lockdown sequence. Reinforced shutters slid over windows. Heavy bolts engaged in steel-framed doors. Each mechanical sound represented another layer of protection between us and what the world had become. I led Max inside and began my standard security checks. Before anything else, though, I cleaned and properly examined his shoulder. Finding no injuries under his fur filled me with profound relief. He'd been my constant companion through years of preparation. Losing him would have been unthinkable. The world had changed in just 12 hours, and my plans would need to change with it. But for now, we were safe. We had supplies, defenses, and most importantly, we had each other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The infected would eventually spread beyond the cities. Other survivors might come seeking help. Every scenario I'd prepared for would need to be reevaluated. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, as I settled into my fortified sanctuary with Max resting his head on my lap, I allowed myself a moment of pure gratitude. We'd survived the first day, we'd made it home together. The real test was just beginning.